or prairie grassland, the expansive arid desert, and the river valleys of the south, the Yalu and the Yangtze, the Ganges and the Indus, the Euphrates and the Tigris, providing the lifeblood of the great civilizations of China, India, and Persia. Genghis Khan came from the steppe, the land extending from Manchuria to Hungary, home to the pastoral nomads. Little has changed in the lives of the people here since the birth of Genghis Khan 800 years ago. Then, as now, nomads lived by raising animals, mainly horses and sheep, and wandering from place to place with their herds in pursuit of the grass and the seasons. Their livelihood, herds of livestock, their homes felt tents, and their families were always on the move. There were no walls for defense. Security depended on constant vigilance, mobility, and readiness. Once the nomads adopted the horse, the stirrup, and the bow, they became horse archers, the most formidable cavalrymen of pre-modern history. None of these time-honored skills has been lost on the descendants, despite the passing centuries. Life on the open Asian steppe can be hard and cruel. Summer lasts just 3 short months, from June to August, and the land blossoms in a carpet of grass and flowers. The rest of the year, blizzards and ferocious winds sweep the bare plains. These conditions, and the contest for the best grazing lands, historically set one tribe against another. Waves of horsemen would appear out of the steppe to plunder the fields and cities of their sedentary and civilized neighbors. Periodically, a leader of more than usual ability would succeed in subjecting a large number of tribes. Nomadic empires rose and fell with astonishing swiftness. One such leader was Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Temujin was born in or around the year 1167, the son of a tribal chief. His father was murdered by rivals, but he somehow survived and established himself as leader of a small clan of his own. As time passed, Temujin extended his authority over more and more Mongol clans. In 1206, at an assembly held on the banks of the river Onan, Temujin was proclaimed the supreme Khan of all who dwell in tents of felt, and given the name Genghis Khan, or universal ruler. His palace was still a nomad's tent, and from it the great Khan set out to conquer the rich, city-based societies beyond the steppe and the desert. His avowed aim was to conquer the world. He began with China. China was divided between the Qin, with their capital at Beijing, formerly called Peking, in the north, and the Sung in the south, with their capital at Hangzhou. The Qins were nomads themselves, who had crossed the Great Wall less than a century before and pushed the Sung back beyond the Yalu River. In 1211, it was the turn of the Qin to come under attack from the steppe. The Mongols made a series of raids deep into the territory south of the Great Wall. Genghis Khan then developed a more systematic invasion plan, with 3 separate armies advancing into Qin territory. At first, the Mongols found the defenses of the capital, Beijing, and its parapets unassailable. The walls of the city stretched 18 miles. They were 40 feet high and 40 feet thick, with 900 towers to strengthen them. But Genghis Khan was relentless. He created a corps of engineers skilled in siegecraft and staffed by captured Chinese prisoners and defectors. The result was that Beijing was completely cut off from help and fell in 1215. Palaces and public buildings were looted and burned. Many of the inhabitants were massacred. Beijing was only the first of many capitals savaged by these nomads who feared and hated a way of life they could not understand. The World, a Television History, will continue on TLC.
Look back on the followers of Genghis Khan and their era of conquest, the Mongol hordes, a storm from the east, beginning tonight at 9 on TLC.
You shrink from human contact. You avoid each other like the plague. You are not you yet. Morning breath
Continues on TLC. The dream of becoming master of all China obsessed Genghis Khan for the rest of his life. But after the fall of Beijing, he decided to lead his armies toward the west, to the Islamic state of Khwarizm. Led by its ambitious ruler, Muhammad Shah, Khwarizm stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Pamir Mountains in Asia, and from the steppe to the Indus. In 1218, Genghis demanded that Muhammad should acknowledge him as Great Khan and overlord. When Muhammad refused and murdered the Mongol ambassadors, Genghis took the offensive and commenced a 3-year campaign of sustained devastation, destroying most of the Khwarezmian cities and towns. At Bukhara, for example, the Mongols first set the wooden buildings on fire and used the populace as cover to attack the citadel. Firebombs and rocks were hurled in. Assaults of increasing ferocity were launched against the walls until at last the citadel was taken. The 30,000 defenders were slaughtered and their women and children taken as slaves. All buildings were razed to the ground. Finally, the great Khan himself climbed into the pulpit of the city's mosque and delivered a sermon to the survivors. "O people, know that you have committed great sins. If you ask me what proof I have for these words, I say it is because I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." After vanquishing the empire of Muhammad Shah, Genghis remained in the west until 1223, mopping up local resistance. It was his last effective campaign. He invaded China again in 1226, but he was already an old man and seriously ill. Within a year, he was dead at 73. As an empire builder, Genghis ranks with Alexander the Great and Napoleon. In 20 years, he had extended his rule from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian. There were many reasons for Genghis's success. The Mongols were masters of subterfuge. Sometimes they stampeded riderless horses into the enemy to confuse them. Sometimes they tied stuffed sacks to their horses to appear more numerous. They were masters of the feigned withdrawal, luring the enemy into ambush. Lightly equipped, fast-moving, agile, and efficient, they could cover 200 miles a day. The Mongol rules of war were simple. Those who surrendered instantly became their slaves. Those who did not were massacred. After the defeat of a Christian army in Hungary in 1241, an eyewitness reported, "During a march of 2 days, you could see nothing along the roads but fallen warriors, their dead bodies lying about like stones in a quarry." He might have added that the heads of their enemies were used in the building of the Mongols' own gruesome beacons to warn off further attacks. After Genghis Khan's death, his successors were determined to complete the conquest of China. At an assembly of Mongol leaders in 1229, Genghis's third son, Ögedei, was elected Great Khan. He was not an outstanding soldier like his father, nor yet a gifted administrator. He was chosen because his popularity and political skills made his authority acceptable to the numerous and powerful descendants of Genghis. Conquest was left to the generals, and during the reign of Ögedei, the frontiers of the Mongol Empire expanded in 3 directions: against the Qin Empire, against the Khwarezmians in Persia, and against Europe. The Qin were finally overthrown in 1234, and in the next year, Ögedei planned the invasion of Europe. It was to be led by Batu Khan, a grandson of Genghis and viceroy of the westernmost parts of the empire. Batu Khan had about 150,000 troops at his disposal. At this time, no European power could muster much more than 20,000. There were frenzied attempts by rulers near the Mongol line of advance to find allies. Their attempts were futile. The Mongols' first European target was Russia, and a campaign was launched over the winter of 1237 to 38. The frozen rivers served as highways for the advancing cavalry. The unprepared and disunited principalities of South Russia were unable to offer effective resistance. One by one, they were destroyed. All was laid waste. The World, a Television History, will continue on TLC. At the same time as the invasion of Russia, a 2-pronged assault was launched against Poland and Hungary. Crossing the Oder River at Ratibor, the Mongol army swept northwards up the valley. Breslau was bypassed. At Liegnitz in April 1241, the combined German-Polish army was annihilated. Then the Mongols swept through Buda and Pest, nearly reaching Vienna, and then along the Adriatic into Bulgaria. If the Mongols had continued to sweep across Western Europe as easily as they had across Asia, today's world would be very different. But fate intervened. Disputes arose over succession back home after the death of Ögedei in 1241. Batu Khan had to turn back with his armies to Mongolia. Eventually, Ögedei's ambitious nephew, Mongol, was elected Great Khan. He decided to undertake 2 new campaigns, one against the Sung Empire in southern China, the other against the Arab states of Mesopotamia and Persia. Mongol himself took charge of the Chinese War, and the campaign in the west was entrusted to his younger brother, Hulagu. The campaign was planned with the usual Mongol thoroughness, and on New Year's Day, 1256, a mighty army crossed the river Oxus. The key to the campaign was the capture of Baghdad, which fell in 1258 after a long siege. The Caliph's palace, the Grand Mosque, and other public buildings were burned. Much of the cultural accumulation of 5 centuries was destroyed. Muslim civilization has not yet fully recovered. But just as Christian Europe was saved by the death of Ögedei in 1241, the death of Mongol in 1259 saved Muslim Asia. An armed conflict broke out between rival claimants for the succession. The army under Hulagu withdrew from Syria for the Mongol heartland, leaving only a skeleton force in the Near East. Once this was known, in Cairo, the Sultan of Egypt marched to the defense of Islam. At Angelut, near Nazareth, on the 3rd of September, 1260, the Egyptian army inflicted a crushing defeat on the outnumbered Mongols. The battle was a turning point in history. The spell of Mongol invincibility was shattered. The Mongol westward advance was never seriously renewed. The unity of the Mongol Empire came to an end with the death of Mongke. His younger brother, Kublai, won out in the family power struggle and was proclaimed the 5th Great Khan. Unlike his predecessors, his direct authority appears to have been confined to the east. He exercised only nominal control elsewhere. Free of Mongol oversight, the Ilkhans of Persia descended from Hulagu, the Golden Hordes of Russia, the Chagatai, and the Mongol heartland all pursued their separate destinies for over a century. Kublai spent most of his life in China, destroying the Sung Empire in the 1270s and restoring the unity of the Chinese realm once and for all. But where Genghis had traveled and pitched his tents all over Asia, Kublai Khan preferred a more permanent abode, although it was shaped like a tent. The people of Asia and even beyond were welcome to visit and even to live. Kublai had become, in the words of Marco Polo, the most powerful man since Adam. Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant, was one of the most famous visitors to the court of Kublai Khan, where he spent some 17 years. He described the bustling Chinese capital, Hangzhou, with its lakes and parks, as well as its 1 million inhabitants. It showed that the nomads of the steppe had at last come to see the attractions of a more sedentary life. Kublai Khan had created a Mongol face the West could accept. They could no longer be portrayed as rapacious savages, devouring the flesh of dogs and men. Given time, the Mongols had learned to create. They gave the Eurasian world almost a century of peace, permitting the exchange of goods and ideas between East and West on an unprecedented scale. Silver and gold from Europe reached China. Chinese porcelain circulated in Europe. This extremely rare and valuable 13th century Sung piece may have first traveled across the steppe of Asia in the saddlebags of a camel train, as much as 600 years ago. The Mongols' style of warfare had taken them from their homelands to Korea in the Sea of Java in the east, to Russia and the western shores of the Black Sea in the west. They ranged from Siberia in the north to the Persian Gulf in the south. Never before had a primitive people had such an effect upon world history. And yet, in spite of the greatness of the empire they created, little remains today to remind the world of the might of the Khans. Little, that is, beyond the echo of their names, ringing out across the centuries over the empty steppe of Asia, borne on the wind like the sound of pounding hooves. The Mongol invasions were the last and the most violent assault by nomads the world was forced to endure. Changes like gunpowder meant political and military success was no longer the domain of fast-moving cavalry tribesmen. A period of expansion and discovery was about to begin, with Europeans in search of the riches of China and India. One path to the west would lead to a brave new world and a new era in world history.
The complete story of Genghis Khan and his quest to dominate Europe and Asia, the Mongol hordes, a storm from the east, premiering next.
This portion of the Learning Channel is sponsored in part by DuPont. Better things for better living.
What do all these police officers have in common?
My name is Patrolman James New, and I was shot once Bob Parcell, and I was shot right above the heart.
Every year, more police officers are shot,
Point-blank range.
yet fewer die, thanks to an innovative DuPont fiber called Kevlar
38 caliber.
in bullet-resistant vests.
Tina Dillard, and I was shot twice at close range.
Being a police officer is always going to be dangerous, but it doesn't have to be fatal. DuPont, better things for better living.
Thursday, the Learning Channel takes you inside the human brain. First, from the day we are born, is our destiny set? Why are men and women different? And can a predisposition be changed? We'll explore these questions on the sexual brain. Then, all of these pursuits, good and bad, have something in common. With each, we alter the mind's chemistry. Sometimes we go too far. Examine the addicted brain. Thursday, beginning at 9 on the Learning Channel. There's a common thread in human history. One advance leads to another, and old ideas give birth to new ones. We can tie it all together, find out where we've been and where we might be going. See it happen as we present a 5-hour investigation of history's connections. Friday, beginning at 9 on the Learning Channel.
The complete story of Genghis Khan and his quest to dominate Europe and Asia. The Mongol hordes, a storm from the east, premiering next.